3 quick and easy ways to get the key signature of a song from a chord sheet. Why is that useful? 2 big reasons that I can think of. One is you can remember the chord progressions and the patterns a lot easier in numbering rather than by chord name. And that will allow you to transpose it into different keys much easier and also to remember it a lot better. For example, if I look at a chord sheet and I see C, G, A minor, F, and I know that that's a common pattern of 1, 5, 6, 4, then I don't have to really think about it anymore. C, G, A minor, F. I don't really have to think about the chords themselves because I know that pattern. I've been using it for a long time, and so I know how to use that 1, 5, 6, 4 not only in the key of C but also other keys. For example, if I play it 1, 5, 6, 4 in the key of D, then it's just part of you after a while, these chord progressions. And so there's a lot of common ones that you'll start to get familiar with. And when you know the key of a song and you look at a chord sheet, you start to see these patterns, but you have to know the key to know the numbering of the chords. So that's the first reason. If you don't know the key, you don't know what chord is which number. And so the numbering system, they call it the Nashville numbering system. That's what we're talking about here. That's one of the best tools that you can use to remember songs. So memorization and transposition kind of go together, and they're one, and that's the first reason. And the second reason is for improvisation. Everybody knows that you can, if you're in the key of C, you can improvise pretty easily on any white note here. But if you're in another key, this is the key of D, for example. But you want to know that you're in the key of D if you want to improvise. So if you see D, G, and B minor on a chord sheet, but you want to go out of just playing just the standard chords, and you want to do some tricks or trills or whatever, you want to do some more improvisation on your right hand or even on your left hand, intermediate chords, playing transitional chords, you need to know what key you're in. So those are 2 big reasons. To be able to recognize the scale degree of the chords that you're playing so you can recognize patterns and transpose. And then the second reason being for improvisation and being able to add more than just playing the standard chords. So those are 2 big reasons. So here's 3 tips. I struggled for a while getting to know how can I recognize the key of a song just from a chord sheet. And so the 3 tips that helped me, I'll share right now. And the first one is pretty plain. This is probably the easiest, and many of you may already know it, is look at the start and the end chord of the song that you're playing. The start and the end chord. If it's the same, usually, almost always, that'll be the key that you're in. So for example, let's look at a song here. We have a chord sheet. Just look these chords up online. So we're looking at the first verse of Amazing Grace. Okay, so we can see here that it starts on a G chord and ends on a G chord. So, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. So it starts and ends on a G chord. So it's almost definitely in the key of G. And there are a couple other ways to test. I'll show you in a minute the other 2 tips. But the notes that means the notes that we're going to use in this key are these ones: G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. You wouldn't use the F because you're in the key of G. So now that you know that, you start to know some other chords that you can use. You start to know the notes that you can use. Don't hit an F when you're playing this song. You know that if you're in the key of G, a standard chord is going to be a D, because when you're on a root of any chord, the 5th is another common chord that you're going to play a lot. So we're going to hit a D in here, which is right. And the C is the fourth. So that's one way. The second way is, because that's not always going to give you the root every single time. It's going to give it probably 80% of the time. But if you see a song that ends on a different chord than the first, that might not be the key. Or if you, in very rare cases, if they're the same, the start and end chord are the same, there's a small possibility that it won't be. So what's another way? Okay, so another way is look at the minor chord. Okay, if you see that there's only one minor chord, and here it's E minor, you see on the chord sheet here for this song. At the end it's was blind. So you have an E minor here on the last line. The minor chord, if you only see one minor chord in the song on the chord sheet, it's 90+% of the time it's the sixth scale degree, the sixth note in the key. They call it also the relative minor, which is in G, in the key of G, it's the E minor. So when you're going up the scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from G, it's E. So if you see that there's only one minor chord, if you see that there's only one minor chord in the chord sheet, that's most likely the 6. And what you can do is, whatever that note is, if it's E minor, put your finger on there and count up 3 notes, 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. And you have your key, G. Okay? And so that works. So we've just done those 2 tests, and it's telling us we're in the key of G. Okay, now what if there's multiple minor chords and the song doesn't start or end on the right chord, on the root chord, or it's different, you're still confused? Let's take a look at another example here. This is canon in D. Now this has a longer chord progression, more chords, and it has 2 minor chords in it. And this example I'm showing here, it starts on a D and ends on an A. So it goes D, this is canon D, A, B minor, F sharp minor, G, D, G, A. Okay, that progression I just played, I'm not looking at the whole song, I'm just looking at part of the progression. But how would I know, just by looking at this, if I was looking at it, what key it was in? The problem is we have 2 minors here, B minor and F sharp minor. So that can get a little confusing, but here's a quick trick. Another one. Look at the major chords, all of them together. So you have D, not the minor chords, but the major chords. D, okay? Why don't I put my finger on just the note? You have D, you have G, and you have A. Those are the major chords: D major, A major, and G major. Okay, the trick is look at the 2 major chords that are next to each other. So G is right next to A. The key of the song is the other major chord root. D is the key. We already knew this is canon in D. We already knew it, but I'm just showing an example of if you have minor chords, and just another test. If you look at usually it's the 3 major chords if they're in the song, you can tell which one is the key of the song by looking at the one that's farthest away from the other 2. The reason why is because there's this thing called diatonic chords, where if you're in a key, if the song stays in a key, and you're not doing some like jazz or advanced, if the song stays in a key, you have diatonic chords. And it sounds complicated, but it's basically just a way of saying which chords go within that key. This is the key of D, these notes right here. You want to know all the chords that fall within that key, where they're, for example, if you're on a D, it's gonna be a D major, not a D minor, because F is not in the key of D. If you're in the key of D, the diatonic chord for D is the D major. The diatonic chord for the next note up in the key of, in the scale, if you're in the scale of D, the key of D, the next note up is E. So your chord for E, it's not going to be an E major. It's going to be an E minor, because A flat or G sharp is not in the key of D. E minor is. So basically all that to say, within the diatonic chords, you have 3 major keys. You have 3 minor keys, and then you have one which is called diminished. Don't worry about that. But the major ones are going to be the scale degree of 1, 4, and 5. We're looking at D. If I'm going to show you in C, it would be the C, the F, and the G would be the major chords. So when you look at the major chords together, just look at the 2 that are together, and the other major chord is almost always the key. So that's the third trick, and it helps a lot to know these 3 tricks if you're playing songs by Chord Sheet. You can quickly identify the key of the song 99% of the time with these 3 tricks I've found in most songs that I've been playing. So hopefully it helps you too.